to our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who usually do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time, and we have been shining on the wheel of time for the past year! Woo! We've been doing this successfully, most of the time successfully, for a whole year.
I mean, maybe not successfully, but we've been doing this for a year.
And that's pretty impressive because, like, guys, we had to manifest this podcast super hardcore. Like, we were talking about it for maybe, like, almost a year before. I was like, let's just buy recording equipment and let's do this.
It was a solid 6 months that we talked about this before we started it.
Yeah. So lots of discussions went in even to the pre-stuff of this. So it is weird to be like, oh, we've only been doing this a year.
Right.
But then I think about the 11 Robert Jordan books we slogged through. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's definitely been a year.
It's been so long.
It feels like forever and then not at all. But yeah. So we are just doing this episode as like a free-form questions from you guys, questions from us. We're doing like a little check-in as two best friends who decided to do a crazy thing.
We're celebrating ourselves for doing it.
I know. And guys, we're celebrating in the same room. So if it's a little echoey, it's because we're using Laura's microphone in Hannah's dad's kitchen.
Yeah.
As one does. So
typical.
We are masked because we're careful. And we're just really excited to like get into this and see what comes up in this little chat and check-in. So first of all, thanks to like all the people who listen to this podcast.
Yes.
And who've been listening for the past year. Thank you to all the people who like do little check-ins, who like follow up with us, and thank you to everyone who's like done collaborations with us in the past year. I don't think we ever expected to do stuff like this before. Right. So it's been a ton of fun, and thank you to Laura for doing this podcast with me.
Well, thank you to Hannah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you don't see. Like, you guys just like listening to the podcast, you're like, oh, they just had a discussion or whatever. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and Hannah takes care of so much of that with our social media and our website, and making sure that like the website that we use to upload everything so that they get to the right places gets there, and like creating the designs for our images and everything. Hannah does a lot of that. So
but in
props to her for
same breath. Laura does so much freaking work, guys. Like, Laura is our main editor. She's doing all the sound stuff. And when I tell you, like, one day we were talking to one of the people that we know who also does this, and they're like, I don't really do that much editing. And I was like, the way I trust Laura to edit out anytime I sound stupid, like, I couldn't just not have an episode. There are so many times during an episode where I'm like, Laura, cut this out. And then I do like a 3-minute tangent. And I'm just like, this poor girl has to like edit out this sound clip of me.
I mean, I try to do a good job at it. So
she does a great job. I think she's learned a lot about editing that
I
never learned. And Laura also does an amazing job with trying to connect people. And I really appreciate all the stuff she brings to the table. And she works really hard, just as hard, even harder than I do a lot of the time. No. So all the show notes you read, those are Laura, and we're crazy enough to always want to put every single thing you mentioned.
Sometimes it's a lot. Like, there have been times when I'm like editing an episode and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did we watch so many things?
So many tangents. Hannah will just randomly throw in an Arrested Development line, and it wasn't necessarily.
But we'll mention
it. It's going in the show
Shout
notes.
out.
So Laura does all of that work, and it's always really impressive. And like at the end of the week, it's really nice because I feel like a lot during the week I have like small little mini things that I'm doing, but then from like Sunday to Wednesday, I know Laura's crazy busy with podcast stuff, and I just get to sit there and have like a little email pop into the Our Pod email where it's like, the episode is finished processing, and I'm like, oh cool, I get to listen to this little nugget, and Laura's like sitting at work doing 2 jobs at once. So props to her for all the work she does and all the work we've done. So yes, a little thank you to the both of us, and that's exactly why we're celebrating and pushing off the next book in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time for another week.
I also wanted to give like some specific shout outs to like our families for being number 1 listeners.
Yes.
Our friend Veronica, Ronnie reads regularly, number 1 fan. Also our friends that we have made through the podcast Literature and Lo-Fi, Ben, fiction fans, Lily and Sarah, story darlings. Also would like to shout out Friends Talking Fantasy podcast and so many others, but those specifically for, and our friend Bobby for coming on the podcast too. But they have all been such supporters and great at working with us and listening to the pod and promoting us. So thank you so much, guys.
Yes. Everyone's been in our corners, and it's such a unique community that we just kind of like walked into, and we're like, we're here.
Like Hannah said earlier, we never expected to do collaborations or anything like that. And now it's just so fun to know that we're able to work with literally such creative and fun people. Like, I listen to Fiction Fans podcast, and sometimes I'm like blown away, like, oh my gosh, I like actually have interacted with these people and recorded a podcast with them, and they are so smart and fun, and they have such a good podcast. So I'm like in awe that we actually like are friends with them. Like, it blows my mind.
It's such a weird thing, because it's just one of those things where we're sitting there listening to these people, and it's like, they're doing such great things that are so different and unique. And I'm just so happy that I even get to be a small part of that, where they like recognize our tweets and they retweet us, and we're all like joking about stuff. And like Sarah, every time she mentions a book, I'm like, I need to add this to my TBR.
I often text Hannah and I'll be like, where have I heard of this book? And she's like, I don't know. I don't think I mentioned it to you. And I'm like, it must have been Fiction Fans. I think I heard it on their podcast.
Yeah. And so, yes, thank you to everyone. Like, I've been going back through the FTF log, like listening to all their back episodes, because they have so many to listen to. So download all them. But like, even them they were like really the first people who introduced us to the community. And I'm like, it's so cool that like they have such a unique experience, and we got to be like a small part of that. Yeah. So I really appreciate everything everyone's done. Ben, our number 2 fan, as he puts himself in the Twitter messages.
He demoted himself.
He did it because like he did put first number 1 listener, but we always say that's Veronica.
We always say it's Veronica.
So he like suddenly made himself number 2. And I was like, you demoted yourself. It's like, I know where I stand. So Ben's like off. He is the number 2 fan. He's always in our corner. And Veronica literally texts us in a group message every week as she's listening. And she the other night I talked to her.
So supportive.
I talked to her for 3 hours last night on the phone. And literally, she was like, sometimes I forget what you tell me and what I've just heard on the podcast. So I pretend like they're both conversations we've had. So that is a real fact about one of my best friends.
That's amazing.
Without further ado, we will dive into a couple of like great listener questions that are so thoughtful, and we're just so excited.
And Hannah and I contributed a couple questions too.
Yes, we did. We have thought thoroughly about like things we want to talk about on the podcast. So let's start off with a doozy of looking back on the past year from Veronica herself. Mm-hmm. If we were restarting now with the knowledge we have after this past year, is there anything we would change with the formatting of our episodes?
You know, I'm a really big fan of our format, so I would say no.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, I don't know, there's something really unique about our podcast. I haven't, like, listened to a podcast that does the specific deep dives we do. Yeah. And the, like, us checking in with other stuff. I feel like there's just flavors that anyone could come in and be like, I have friends who are like, oh, I only listened to the first half. Or I have friends who are like, I'm not going to read the books. Or I am going to read the books because you convinced me to. Or people who, like, literally read a Wheel of Time book and then they're like, oh my God, I get to listen to the next 4 episodes of your podcast. And I think having those like variation on fans is so amazing. Oh, fans, listeners, you guys could not be fans of being like, I hate listening to every second of
it. We could have a lot of hate listeners.
Yes, we could. But like, I like that we have, it's kind of like there's a little bit for everyone. And I think Lori and I are like, we're so compatible together, but we're also very distinct personalities. If you guys can pick up on that. Where I think us working together, it gives like exactly what we want, which is reaching an expanse of people who can get something out of it.
I think the thing too that like the format works for both of us is that there's room for variation, where we have the 2 sides of one coin, where it's like we can have a conversation and talk about things that we've been enjoying, and then we can kind of get into the homework.
Yes,
and I think it's a good balance for us to have the format set up the way that it is. So I really like it. And like Hannah said, for listeners, you know, they don't have to listen to one half or the other, or both, I guess, if you're hate listening.
Just don't listen.
if you're not a listener, you won't be hearing this. But anyways, so you can pick and choose where you want to jump into the podcast, like as it suits you.
Agreed. So That's a great question, but I think the format we just really had thought about, and like this is what I said, we talked about this for 6 months before we even discussed like how we wanted to format this.
We talked about this for a long time. Like it was a lot of talking about this for, I guess, something that's not as complicated as it sounds, but we did talk about it for a long time.
But I think that goes into something about what works about this podcast. And there are a couple of questions that will address this. But like Laura and I are in each other's corners and we respect each other so much that like it was a collaboration to be like, hey, are you comfortable if we do it this way? Yeah, I think that that'll lead to a good discussion. And so like everything we did starting up to this podcast was like an intense labor of like, here's what I think. What do you think? And then like building a great thing and moving forward with that. So I really am a fan.
So no, Veronica, we're not changing anything.
Nothing is getting changed, except there will be variations.
Except there will be a lot of changes coming forward.
Except there will be some changes. Okay, the next one is from Beard from Tan Sim, which have been one of our favorite episodes to make.
Okay, so one of our favorite episodes to make. So I don't remember what one it was, but it was earlier on when we talked about fruit.
Oh my god, I was gonna say
that I don't know why, but that just went off the rails. And it was one of our earlier podcasts.
Welcome to the Fruit Podcast.
That one. So, like, I don't even think if you look at, like, our discussions of Wheel of Time that was one of the better ones.
No.
But I think early on for, like, a new baby podcast, it really just kind of was, like, a launch pad for us in terms of like our humor and people kind of getting to see what our relationship is like, because we just went off the rails.
And it was about,
and that happens so often for us.
Yeah. And I do think like it was the best thing of like when our personalities first like really showed through, where we weren't being like polite and like checking in. We're like, and I remember specifically there's a portion of the podcast where I like finally changed the subject and Laura just decided to like
go back
double down. And you're like, well, I'm going to say one more thing about fruit. And like, you could definitely tell she was doing it because she's like, this is just the perfect moment to have this bit continue.
I know.
And I was like, I'm going to kill you. And that is just like the perfect distillation of like
and in terms of our format, we will be having a fruit corner.
I literally sent Laura a TikTok from Abbott Elementary because in the last episode, one of them's talking about how he's a picky eater and someone goes, how do you feel about pie? And he looks over to Sarah's face and he goes, fruit should not be pie. And I was like, oh my god, I'm so seen!
Amazing.
We definitely feel a lot about fruit, and I think it's hysterical that we're both like, welcome to the Fruit Podcast was the best.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were on the same page there, but that was the one I was like thinking of, like, that was like early on an episode that I was like, oh, great.
And I think for me also one of my favorite things, like I really enjoy making Laura laugh because like Laura laughs with like her whole self. So anytime I say something like off the rails and it just lands perfectly for her is always one of my favorite.
Well, sometimes like we obviously record a lot on Zoom. And so like sometimes I'm like falling on my chair. Like I'm one of those people that I often make fun of my husband for this because he's one of those people too, but we'll be watching shows, and I know like a lot of people will just watch shows and they're like, oh, haha, that's funny. But he and I will see something like, and like physically move because we find it so funny. And I get physically moved a lot of times by stuff that Hannah says.
So like she got, even in the last episode or 2 episodes ago when I was like, well, we believe a rat got in because a rat got in. Laura like just stopped and died of laughter. And I was like, oh, great. Like you just have those little moments where I'm like, oh God, I just think I enjoy our friendship so much. That
I think
nice
also
to do that.
we enjoy each other just from the standpoint of like, I don't think you meant that to be funny.
No.
At all, but just the way that you said it, I was like, you think a rat got in because a rat got in, and it's just like, chef's kiss.
It's one of the best things. Is Laura and I don't think I can distill like how important our friendship has been to each other over the years. Sure. And even though it's become like a little bit different with the podcast, because like we were mostly texters for like the past 6 years. Like
I have weird phone anxiety.
Yeah, so we're not people who like see each other very often, so it has changed. But like we literally just texted all the fucking time before we started a podcast. There was never a moment where we weren't talking. And like, yes, that's changed, but I do think that that's the perfect distillation of us where we like actually enjoy and think the other one is very funny. So it's great to see the other one laugh. Also, Veronica asks, and this is a question for Laura, when you edit things out of the pod, what makes you choose to do so?
Okay, so this is a good question. And I know like other podcasters, they do like minimal editing. I am kind of anal to the point where I want this podcast to sound really good.
Yeah.
So I listened to a podcast called The Newest Olympian with Mike Schubert, and he does an excellent job with editing, and I kind of want to be as good at editing as him. And he also did Potterless Podcast. More people will probably know him by that, but his editing is so well done, and he knows like the perfect pauses and everything. So when I'm listening back to the episode, if there's times, like I know a lot of times myself especially, I take long pauses in my thoughts. So I'll cut out some of those long pauses and kind of make it flow a little better if necessary. If it fits well in the conversation to have the pauses, I just leave it. I try to cut out ums, like I just did there, if there's a lot of them. If there's not a lot, I just leave it. But more so, I'm looking for like coughing fits, burps, things like that. Me saying, "Excuse me, I have to go let my dog out." A long pause. My oven going off, and I have to get my dinner out. That kind of thing.
Pasteurizing goat's milk sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I'm pasteurizing goat milk, and my pasteurizer will go off, and there's a very loud buzz. So I have to edit that kind of thing out. I also try to be cognizant of our discussions and listening back. If I kind of hear Hannah or myself say something and I'm like, I feel a little uncomfortable about the way that we worded that. Yeah. I think we need to do some research of our own and then maybe mention that at a different time.
Right.
I will also do that. So
Laura's really good at that, guys. And we're not saying like we're sitting here saying a ton of offensive stuff. It's more, sometimes we're not as knowledgeable as we should be before we just run our mouths about something.
Right.
And Laura's really, and she also texts me about it. Like,
I also run it by Hannah. It's not, if I cut out something like that, I definitely run it by Hannah. It's not something I'm just like, that's out.
Yeah. And it's also, I think Laura does a fantastic job at this because it also keeps me more mindful of what we're saying and how we're saying it, which I think is important when you're talking about difficult topics.
Sure.
We are very open about how we are two white cis women. So we are taking a certain perspective that we can't always comment on things.
Right.
Or we should just, there's a term called why am I talking? And it's called wait. And I think that sometimes Laura's good at asking that question when she's editing, like, why are we talking about this? And she'll remove it. And then she'll send me a note saying like, I think we should remove this. And it lets me know that we should maybe talk about this in the future, but I need to be more mindful and do my own research. And I think that that's a really good quality for us to have.
Right. We're both growing as people. We don't know everything. Yeah. And sometimes we jump the gun when it comes to certain discussions, and we need to do a little bit more research. So I will try to be very aware of that. However, I'm not catching all of them. Oh, so there's definitely moments I'm sure listeners have heard where they're like, you guys better shut your mouths because you don't know what you're talking about.
Because Karen and Fyodor were perfect for each other.
No.
No. And we have been corrected. And I will say, like, feel free to correct us.
Yes.
We're the easiest people to correct. And like,
we are very open to criticism if it's constructive. Like, don't be mean. Please don't be mean.
Don't tell us that we should have loved Robert Jordan because that's not going to happen all the time. But you are allowed to tell us we got something wrong. And
yes, even if it is Jordan related.
Right.
Well, we're open to different takes.
And Laura and I have disagreed about like certain things about each other.
Sure.
And both of us just know to be like, okay, well, I don't have to agree, but I have to respect it. So like, I think that that's, always feel free to reach out if you disagree or have a take, and we're willing to talk about it. And I also am way too personal sometimes. It's a very specific trait of mine. I run my mouth before I should. So Laura's very good about me being like, I need to cut this out because I'm going into a very personal detail about a family member. And you guys don't need to know that. And my family member doesn't need to be dragged like that.
Hannah sometimes reveals names too.
Yeah,
a lot.
Very big namer.
She'll name drop and I'm like, I don't think they'll appreciate having their name in this.
A lot of times I catch myself and then I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, my sister and I.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good. So we do try to keep names out. I will name people like my friend Rima or Bobby who come on the pod. We only name people who want to be named. So like us, I don't know if anyone's picked up on it. We never name Laura's husband.
Right.
We're very careful.
We're trying to protect people's
anonymity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, that's some of the stuff we edited out of the podcast. Laura does a great job. Her next question is, have you changed as a reader or not? And I think both of us will say, yeah. Yes. I have definitely changed as a reader. So many things have affected how I read, and it's always for the better. I don't think I would have liked reading what I read in high school or right out of college. And I think we need to be kind to ourselves about that. Like, don't beat yourself up for being a 20-year-old reader. Where I was reading so many, like, I read the Lux series, and it's a very silly series. Sure. And Laura and I are about to be on, like, the Shit She Read podcast, and we're going to discuss, like, a horse novel, and it's going to be a ton of fun, but I don't think you should be like, oh, as a child, I should have really been thinking about my literature.
Man, this book was so dull. Why was I such a dull person? Laura, you were in 3rd grade. It's fine.
And even coming out of law school, like, I finished law school in 2016, and when I started reading again, it was always just, like, whatever was on the Chicago Public Library list. I would just, like, add things that I liked their covers on. And then through the book community, I've learned how to expand my reading, how to make sure I'm trying to follow different authors, different experiences that I don't necessarily know about to make myself a more rounded reader, and just trying to reach different things in myself that challenge me as a person.
Right.
I think it's really, and that bring me joy, because I think that so many people say they want to challenge themselves and then get exhausted by it. So it's okay to sometimes read a very silly romance that I didn't have to learn anything from, but like, it's still good and it still has value. So I think I'm working on myself and making sure I'm a well-rounded but very healthy-minded person.
Sure. Yeah, I think I also I don't know if you went through like a time period where you were not reading as much, but I definitely did, and it was in college. And so in college, I did not really read anything besides school-related reading for a long time. And then when I was on a collegiate livestock judging team my junior and senior year of college, we were traveling a lot, so I did more reading on my Kindle during that time. But the reading that I was doing was not anything like super in-depth. It was a lot of YA. I read all the City of Bones stuff, and I read the Hunger Games, that kind of thing. So I wasn't doing a ton of reading, and it was mostly just YA of the same type of story-ish. And I feel like once I got out of college, then I kind of discovered book podcasts, and then I discovered Bookstagram. And once I kind of saw those things, I kind of, like Hannah said, got more into reading different types of books, different types of authors, and trying to put myself into different experiences through books.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for great like content and great books, like great recommendations, I would highly recommend following on Instagram Lupita Reads, Notes on Bookmarks. They are currently reading podcast, Katie and Meredith and Mindy, and then also Lex with the Text.
I like all of those. I also follow a lot of people, so go through my Bookstagram for great recommendations.
Yeah, follow Hannah's Bookstagram.
Follow mine. I try my best. But Laura's right. Like, I didn't read a ton in college. I was like an English major, so I read a ton of literature. And I think that I was very big into like literature or YA trash. Like, it was either Pretty Little Liars or Anna Karenina.
Yeah, I was mostly in the YA trash category.
And like, I read a lot during the summers. Like, I was still a very avid reader during the summers. I would walk to libraries. There was even one year where I was too poor to pay for internet, and I just read books and watched stuff on a 10-inch square TV that only played DVDs. And I just rented a bunch of DVDs from the library. So support your local library because they're
great
amazing.
Resource. When I first got married, my husband and I, we live in very, very, very rural Illinois, and we did not have internet access. Like, it just was not available to us. So for the first couple years that we were married, we didn't have like any kind of like TV that we could watch or anything. We had DVDs and I could go to the library. I read so many books and we watched so many movies.
Exactly.
So that's all we had access to. Like, people were just like letting us borrow their DVDs, or we would get them at the library, and I was reading a lot.
Right. Which is a good reminder that like, I think we live in a very jaded society where it's like, oh, we all have streaming, and like there are still like rural areas that don't have great internet access and just need those types of resources. And I know someone who recently was discussing how like the library is where she gets all her printing done for her business. And so look into all that libraries do, because it will explode your mind. I think libraries are so important. So Yeah, we have changed as a reader, but we've definitely kept some things like reading from libraries and making sure we're still having joy in reading. Yeah. So, and I definitely didn't read during law school. I actually have a specific memory of once I graduated from law school that my ex-boyfriend was visiting me. And he was talking and I just didn't hear him. And he's like, "Are you mad at me?" And I was like, "Oh, you've just never seen me read a book before."
I ignore people.
I just have really good attention when I'm reading a book I'm enjoying. So
amazing.
Yeah, that's a very Hannah take. This is a quick one. What book has been on your TBR for a very long time that you have not read but you're looking forward to?
Okay, I have two.
Okay.
So the first one is Lonesome Dove.
Okay.
By Larry McMurtry. That one has been on my radar for the longest time.
Interesting.
And I have just not checked it out. And I just recently went and bought it because it is a huge book.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to renew this so many times from the library. I might as well just own it so then the pressure is off.
Fair.
And it is a giant book. And I'm looking forward to reading it. And I'm very interested because people say that it's like the greatest Western ever. And then the other one is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And I also have owned that one for a long time and just have never picked it up. So those two have been on my TBR for probably the longest time because I was looking through my Goodreads and seeing when I added books, and they were like some of the first that I had added.
The first book I ever added to Goodreads was Gone with the Wind, and I added it in May 8th of 2010. So Gone with the Wind is on there. I would say that that's definitely been on there. And the brothers... Karamazov, I can never pronounce that correctly. I've wanted to read that book for so long. I actually own 2 different copies of it because one is like an older version and one is like a brand new version that my friend had on her shelves and she was like purging books. I'm like, oh, it's such a pretty cover. So I really want to read that book. I think it's also getting in my head. And one of the books a lot of these are classics because I am still a pretentious English major. I can't help it. But one of the books that I got right when I graduated from law school was a beautiful book of Ulysses by James Joyce.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to read that book. And I think sometimes I just get in my own head and then I don't read it. And I also want us to, and this is one of the questions I'm learning a little, I want to read some Octavia Butler books.
Oh, yeah.
And I want us to cover them on the podcast eventually.
Okay.
Those are all books that I would really want to read in the future. And they have been on my TBR for far too long.
I think we both want to read more classics, but I think that at least in my situation, classics kind of scare me a little bit.
Yes.
They're intimidating. So it's a situation where I'm like, I really want to read this. People have talked it up so much, but when I look at the classics I've read, I'm like, oh, you've read all the ones that are under 200 pages. So, Whoops.
Well, my stuff is sometimes with my anxiety, it's anxiety, fear-inducing. I'm not supposed to use the term anxiety. My therapist told me so. Yeah. It's fear-inducing to start a book that's such a classic and I know will take me a while. And sometimes I try to lower my reading goals to do that. And then I just find myself rushing through other books because they're easier to read and they're faster and they make you feel better because you can finish them.
Right.
So I do hope to read lots of classics. It's just difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
What is a book that you were surprised that you liked?
A book that I was surprised that I like. Okay, this one is Monstress.
Oh,
by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda.
It started Laura's love of graphic novels written by women.
She's Although I have not read a lot of graphic novels.
No, that's very true.
But I really loved those. We were scheduled to do something. We might still do it in the future, so I will not reveal all of that. But we were going to read Monstress. And when I just saw the cover of this book, I did not know anything about it. I was like, Hannah, I'm going to hate this.
And she did kind of kick a fuss at when I was like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And you're like, fine.
I was like, that's what we're doing. Okay, I'm not going to like it.
And even on the second page, she texted me and she was like, this is not looking good, Hannah.
I know.
Why are we reading?
But then after I finished the first volume, I was like, I need the next. And so I flew through the first 3 volumes, went and got the 4th and 5th, and then I pre-ordered the 6th one. I'm excited for the next one to come out. I really was shocked that I liked that type of book. It's so dark and very fantastical. There's a lot of different political things going on. And I'm not somebody that has ever really been into comics or graphic novels at all. That was my first graphic novel experience.
Right.
But I really loved Monstress.
It's a very good graphic novel series. Again, Hannah's terrible with series, so she's on book 5, but she's enjoyed the entire journey with them. One of my books actually is something like very unique to me, which is I read a lot of fiction, and one of the first nonfiction books I ever read was Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, and I was shocked at how into that book I got. Like, I wasn't someone who really knew a ton about true crime and stuff like that before I got into it, and I just remember reading it and being like, oh, this is so fascinating, and it's so intense, and it's so engaging. And I realized, like, oh, nonfiction can have its merits.
It can actually be good, and it's not all boring stuff.
Right. It's not all boring histories. It can be, like, fantastical history. And, like, the way Erik Larson, I would not say he's the best nonfiction writer in the world, because he's very good on, like, imagine this if this happened. It's also got some speculation in it. But that, and then Evicted by, I believe his name is Matthew Emmond, but I cannot remember his name. But it's about housing crises in specifically Milwaukee, which was such a good book. And it hit on a lot of things I care about with, like, the unhoused population. And there's a beautiful line in there that I think about constantly, which is like, Black men get locked up and Black women get locked out. Because it's very much about how, like, we built a society where women cannot keep their homes because they can't house felons and they can't do this. And we built a really trash society in America when it comes to that stuff. Yeah. And that book, like, I remember finishing it and I just cried on my bed. I was so touched by it. And it really, like, it didn't change my mind on anything, but it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I didn't think about before.
And, you know, that's what books are supposed to do.
Exactly. And so I would say that was a book that I wasn't really expecting to love. It was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, I've heard good things about this book. And it touched me in a way that I'm like, oh my God. This book, like, sits with you. And whenever someone's like, what's your favorite nonfiction book? It's pretty much that one. I usually pick that one. So this must be a Laura ad. What animal would be the most terrifying if it could speak?
Okay, I added this one.
A rat. A rat? Right now, because it lives in my apartment, and I would be terrified if it just started talking in the walls. And it's like, are you going to be up by 10? Because I'm kind of hungry.
So I've tried to think about this really hard.
Okay.
Because I submitted this question because I saw it on, like, an icebreakers question list. And I was like, that is an excellent way to get to know people, to see what animal they find the most terrifying if it could speak. And I was like, even doing chores the other night, I was like, which of you would scare me the most if you started talking? And I decided it was the chickens of the animals that I own.
Fair.
But I think, like, a bird talking to me would really freak me out more than a mammal. I don't know why, but birds are very prehistoric. They're actually very gross. They're people that don't know anything about birds, they're very gross. Like, they're quick to cannibalize. Like, they're very disgusting. And I think they would scare me the most if they could talk. Like, if a chicken came over to me and started talking, or even like a small bird, like a sparrow or something, I'd be freaked out. Less so than my dog. I think my dog talking to me, I would almost be like, oh, thank God, I've been wondering why you've been eating your poop. But I think birds would freak me out more than other animals. And maybe reptiles, too, talking.
Oh, reptiles. So this is such a funny thing, because, like, Laura's thinking on it, I'm like, how gross is this bird? I don't want to talking to me. I'm thinking more on a fundamental level of, like, which animals are the smartest that talking to them would freak you the fuck out? Because, like, if a bird could talk to you, like, all it's going to be is, like, worms. Like, it's going to be, like,
That's true. They don't have very big brains.
Yeah. And, like, one time, one of my sisters always talked through her dog's voice, and she was always like, you fibble humans. And I was like, your dog is not thinking you fibble humans. He's thinking, put
me down.
Pet me. Are you, come, outside, treat.
Sure.
Like, dogs do not have the brain function to, like, have an actual conversation with you, which is also why I kind of pick rats, because I've learned a lot about how, like, smart they are.
Hannah's now a rat expert.
Not really, but people, like, share a lot with you about rats when you tell them you have one in your apartment. And, like, they're like our orchid man came, and he's like, yeah, you know, mice are really, like, curious by nature, but rats are more, like, self-sufficient, and they're not going to come out until, like, everything's dark, and you're not going to be down there to catch them, and they're, like, trying to survive.
They're, like, in the sewers with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with pizza. Like,
Shredder? I have been calling the rat in my house Ratatouille, but now it might be Shredder. Which I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I really like
going
them
out.
too.
So I have a cousin who comes and visits from Italy quite often, because he lives there, obviously.
Sure.
And, like, we all assign each other different Ninja Turtles.
Which one were you?
I was the blue one.
Okay.
Who's like
Donatello's orange.
Donatello's orange. That was my
Michelangelo's red, right?
Yes, and he's the no.
Raphael is red.
Raphael is red. Michelangelo is orange. I want to say Donatello is purple.
Oh, okay.
Donatello is purple, and Leonardo. And Leonardo is kind of the like, I'm a leader and I'm really self-assured, but I'm also really insecure. And it's like, that one's Hannah. So they all tracked. And like, I think one of my older sisters was Raphael, and we were like, yeah, she does get angry outbursts quite a lot. Sure. And then my Italian cousin loved pizza, so he was Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of, it's the sorting hat of the Teenage Ninja Turtle. But yeah, so knowing how smart rats are, I think that's why they would creep me out the most, because it's like, I don't want to have an animal talk to me and be somewhat intelligent. It's like, what if
an intelligent or like an ape, like a primate?
Octopus? Like if an octopus talked to you and you found out how smart octopi are, wouldn't that be terrifying?
My octopus teacher.
I wouldn't like it. So
or like orcas or
a
very smart mammal, and you're like, why are you doing this? And like, we're killing for fun.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, stop.
Like, I want it to have the like basic instinct of like food, like or pee, like because like that's not as creepy to me, because it's like, fine, whatever, we're just interacting on a more easier level for both of us. But like, if it's actually intelligent, I don't want to know what it's thinking.
That's true.
So
that's a very good point.
Great icebreaker question.
I feel like though, like as a little kid, like as someone who has like loved animals for so long, like as a little kid, I always wanted to be like Eliza Thornberry and talk to animals and stuff. However, looking back on that now, I'm like, nope, I'd rather have the power of flight. Like, I think in general, I would be kind of creeped out.
Yeah.
Talking to animals. So
also because in that context, because it's always in the context of like, I can talk to animals, but no one else knows I can talk to animals. And I wouldn't want that type of like,
maybe if everybody could do it, we were really used to it. It'd be okay.
Like if tomorrow we woke up and everyone could hear rats talk, think about how much that would stop people.
Oh, it would scare people.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where I wouldn't want to talk to animals because, let's face it, you're pretty much just convincing yourself you're insane.
Right.
It's like, I don't think that's, again, the guy who used to have TV show I used to love with, what's his name? Chandler, who like got the paper a day before with a cat. Did you ever watch that?
I didn't watch that one.
It was called Early Edition.
Okay.
And the premise of it was every morning the paper showed up with a cat, and then he would
a new cat every day?
It was the same cat.
Oh,
like the cat, and it like, I guess the insinuation was the cat was delivering the newspaper. And then something in the headlines was like someone he had to save. And the entire episode was him trying to find the person and save them so that the headline wouldn't appear the next day in the paper.
Wow.
And it was a very weird show, and I remember watching it. But at like some point, you're like, I think I'm insane.
It's gone too far.
It's gone too far. It's like, this cat delivering papers. What's going on?
What is with this cat?
There's a lot of 90s like magical realism shows where it's like, wow, and you just didn't think you were insane.
Although I will say, Wishbone, I miss that show.
Oh my God.
So cute.
Such a good show.
That dog is adorable.
So cute.
We need more kids shows like that. That was so cute.
It was so smart. Like, it didn't talk about the kids. It treated them like...
And his little outfits. Oh!
So cute. It was such a good way to learn Shakespeare, guys.
I know. Bring back Wishbone.
Bring back Wishbone, guys. What is something weird that you'd recommend that someone try at least once?
Something weird I recommend? You go first. Let me think on this.
I need to think on this, too. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
But remember to think on it.
Okay, let's not skip it.
I will quickly highlight it.
Yeah.
Let me highlight this, guys.
I'm trying to think of something weird. Like, I do so many weird things that it's hard to narrow down to one.
Hello, it's Hannah from the future. Laura and I had a question that was pending during our little chat we had, but we said we would remember to answer it. And then, of course, in all due fashion, we completely forgot and then just ended up chatting for the rest of the episode. But since we promised to give you an answer, here's my answer. So the question was, what's something we recommend people do at least once? And I've thought a lot about this because it was a really hard question. And I realized, I recommend people travel on vacation once just by themselves. Obviously, stay safe and make sure people know where you are most of the times. But I think that traveling by yourself is really underrated and no one thinks to do it. Last year, I took a trip by myself to Colorado with my dog and I went hiking, and I'd never been hiking before. And I think it just like gave me the excuse to have the vacation I always wanted without having to answer to anyone else. And it was really wonderful and healing. And like, I think people are so bad at being alone right now that it was really nice to just be alone for a while, even if it was with my puppy. I had a wonderful time. I really learned that I love hiking, and I learned so much about myself on that trip just by reading and sitting alone in an Airbnb watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine over and over again on nights that I just wanted a nice, relaxing night in. And I just got to explore Denver by myself, and it was wonderful. So I really think like, even if you can just get out a couple hours from your home or, travel to a different state by yourself, I really think that it's good and it's healing because it just teaches you a little bit about who you are, because so much of our lives are based on other people and making them happy. So I really, really recommend that. And so everyone should try that once. And without further ado, back to our normally scheduled programming where you don't have to just hear me.
Hi friends, this is Laura coming to you from a time when I remembered to answer this question. So when I reflected on it, I couldn't really think of anything. So per usual, I did a little research, went online and tried to find some things that people recommend you do in your lifetime. There were a lot of 30 before 30 lists that made me feel bad considering I'm going to be 30 in a very short amount of time, and I haven't done nearly as many things as some other people are apparently accomplishing before they're 30. But maybe I'll make it on some of those 50 before 50 lists. But I think, my personality does not lend itself to traveling. Well, I'm kind of a nervous worrier. But I think something that I would recommend people do is just hone in on their interests. That has been something that's been really important to me in my life so far, is just finding things that I'm interested in. I have a lot of hobbies, but they've been a really fulfilling part of my life. And I'd say one of my favorite hobbies has been raising my own food. So I have a garden that my husband and I take care of, and we raise a lot of plants, and then we have chickens, so we have fresh eggs, we have goats, so we have milk and cheese, and we make lotion. So, a lot of those things are really rewarding considering you see these projects through from start to finish, and it's really nice to know exactly where my food is coming from. So I guess short answer, hone in on your hobbies and hone in on your interests. Long answer would be, or a more specific answer would be, try to grow some of your own food if you have the ability to do so. I know that doesn't work for a lot of people's home situations, but if you're able to, have like a small fruit tree or something like that, then try it. It's really a fun project and really rewarding. Okay, thanks friends. Bye.
If you could be a fictional character, which one would you be?
Which one would I be if I could be a fictional character? It's hard because it's like, if you think of any like fictional characters, most of them have like tragic circumstances. Like, you don't want to put yourself into a fantasy novel. Like, would I want to be Randolph Thor? No. Something bad's going to happen there.
You're going to lose a hand.
Like, if I'm going to be anybody in the Wheel of Time, it's not going to be one of that main set of characters because stuff's going down. I want to be one of those people like back in Emmons Field that's like just hanging out. Herding sheep.
Well, like, the problem is when I was growing up, all the characters I loved were like dramatic and not like the other girls, in a way that I'm like, do I actually want to be that character? Like, do I want to be Lizzie Bennett?
Yeah, and that's what I thought initially. I was like, you know what? I love Little Women. Yeah. And I love Jo March.
Yeah.
But I'm like, do I want to be her? No. Her love interest comes out of nowhere.
I know. I would actually be okay with that. That's my toxic trait, guys. I've actually discussed this with Veronica and Laura recently. I honestly do think I'm a main character. And so sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, but it would make sense if I were Jo March to end up with Professor Bear. Like, he was exactly what I'm looking for, and it's good companionship. Sure. And it's like, but Hannah, would you actually want that? I'm like, I don't know. It just makes sense. No. I'm the main character.
Right.
So I guess like, maybe, because that's the thing is like, I was always convinced. I'm like, well, I'm definitely Lizzie Bennett. Well, I'm definitely Jo March. Well, I'm definitely Anne Shirley. Like but also like on the other spectrum of things, my favorite characters were always like toxic like tragic backstories. Like Rogue from X-Men was my favorite, but like I don't want all of the PTSD that Rogue has.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question when you start thinking about what the characters actually have to go through.
Yeah. Trying to think of like what character. Maybe I want to be Chloe Brown. She seems to have a pretty chill life. She eats chocolate. She enjoys things.
I mean, she deals with chronic illness.
She does deal with chronic illness, and that would be unfortunate.
I feel like Eve Brown, the three of them, is like
she's like the easiest one to get.
The like happiest.
Yeah, she is the happiest one, but she also has to deal with like the most judgment from everyone.
That's true.
Wow. I think the answer is
we don't know.
Literature is hard. You can't just escape into it.
We're thinking too hard about it.
We are thinking too hard on it. Let's just say I want to be Anne Shirley. I have red hair.
Donatello. No, I'll go with Joe March just because like that was like my instinct when I had this question. I was like, Joe March is someone I've always like, kind of like felt connected to ever since reading that book a long time ago. So I'll just stick with Joe March because I love that character.
My first instinct is always Lizzie Bennett, but I'm like, I think Anne Shirley is a little bit more Hannah's brand.
Okay.
A little overly emotional, a little like in her own head.
Sure.
And Gilbert Blythe is one of the most romantic characters in literature, along with Mr. Darcy. So I'm cool with it.
Okay.
What is something that people don't really know about you, including your podcast host?
What is something that people don't really know about me?
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day. We are both tall.
Yes.
We are both tall people.
I didn't know you were tall.
Well, I know that you know, but people just hear our voices and it's hard to tell, but we're very high up.
Yeah.
And so we're tall people.
I gaslit Laura into thinking she was 5'11" for a while because I kept telling her I was 5'10" and really I was 5'9".
Well, I'm just slightly taller than Hannah. It's like not that much.
I know. I remember I was always like, I think I'm 5'9" and a half, and you're like, I don't think you are. And later I was like, I'm 5'9". Another toxic trait of Hannah, I say things with my full chest, and then later I'm like, I actually didn't know. And I was like, what? Like, you just say this? I know I don't know. It's just like, people bother you less if you have an answer sometimes.
Yeah, Hannah has, like, for years been like, oh, I'm German and Irish, I'm this much German and I'm this much Irish, and I've always just been like, how do you know? Like, my dad had to do one of those ancestry DNA things, and then I was like, oh, wow, we have all these different things, and he was, like, pretty close on, like, what he knew about his background, but I'm like, I guess I never really was like, there's no way you can be right. He surprisingly was, but I was always just amazed how Hannah was just like so sure, like, oh yeah, I'm this much Irish and this much German, and I was just like, what?
One of my
parents and she was just like, oh, I don't know. One of
my parents told me at one time, and I think it was like their background, so I just like was like, whatever, I'll take that on. And like the thing was the funniest part was I always just said it, and people would like
get into it
weird to Laura about like, how do you not know?
I know. I'm just like, I don't know.
One day we were sitting there and I was like, I mean, I just said what my dad said. I don't actually think it's accurate. Laura's like, what? Like, you're just telling people? I'm like, it doesn't matter.
I know.
Like, no one needs to be right about my ancestry.
I should have just like picked random places.
Yeah.
And just like gone with it. Like random white people places. Like that's where I'm from.
I would say something people don't really realize about me is I'm like a deep romantic. Like look across a coffee shop and being like, oh, what if I fell in love with someone across, like who's sitting down there? Like I'm actually very romantic in that sense. But I don't think that's something I talk about because I recognize that, like, that's not going to happen. I'm, like, very much, like, 2 feet on the ground, but head in the clouds type of person. So that's why, like, with a lot of books I talk about, I don't know if people have noticed it, but a lot of them are, like, romances that I grew up with. And I'm very romantic at heart, but I think I'm also a very jaded person when I'm talking. So people are like, oh, Hannah's so, like, much the pessimist. I'm like, well, actually, I'm a huge romantic. I just know that that's an unrealistic thing to talk about.
I was going to play off of what you're just saying now and be like, well, actually, like, I guess something more personal, like, people don't know about me is, like, I'm actually kind of a big softie, but maybe that comes through. But I think, like, the way that I speak, I'm very sarcastic. So I think people tend to be like, ooh, capital B. But I also, like, that's, I guess, more just, like, the way that I speak and, like, an outward projection. But, like, in reality, I'm just a big softie.
Laura's a bigger softie than I am, and I think people confuse the two of us. Like, I think so many people are like, Hannah's so sweet and like this. And I'm like, No, I'm really not. Like, I'm pretty, like, pessimistic and cynical and, like, very blunt.
When you're a quiet person, I think people tend to be like, oh, mean.
Yeah.
So I get it a lot. Like, people's first impressions of me are often good.
There was a memory of, like, Laura in one of our dorm rooms where we were all sitting there and someone was like looking at something and she was like, whatever. And then all of a sudden she goes, pandas! I love pandas! And she was like, someone was just watching a video of baby panda bears. And Laura like had a meltdown over like how cute that
Everybody
was.
go on YouTube and watch. There's videos of them like crawling out of these little cribs. And the handlers are trying to get them back in the cribs. It's so cute. I love everything purple. I'm wearing all purple right now, actually. But like I love like flowers and little baby animals and babies and like I love cute things. I love all sorts of like little cute things, and I'm kind of just a big softie. I love Disney and all. So
she loves show tunes. All the show tunes of our playlist are definitely Laura.
When we made that playlist, there was definitely a lot more show tunes on there, and Hannah was like, "You got to dial that
by several notches. Like, it needed to be turned back several notches." But yeah, Laura's. I would agree with that. It's one of my favorite things about Laura's how soft she is and how people don't recognize it.
But like physically, we're both very tall. So
yeah, we're really tall. So Laura's a little taller, but
slightly taller.
What was something we learned about each other over the past year? Because like our friendship has changed a little bit.
Sure, yeah. I think we've gotten better at communicating because that's been like a big thing throughout the podcast where like we were just kind of used to communicating on a level where it was just like, oh, guess what happened to me today, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Or here's this funny joke, haha.
Or like, here's a rant where you 1,000% agree with me over everything I'm saying.
Sure, I just need to vent about something and you'll agree. And so I think, doing this podcast, it was like a working relationship.
Yes.
Even though it's a hobby, it takes work and there's a lot of communication that goes into it. And a lot of times we would misunderstand what the other person was saying. So we've gotten better at communicating. And also I think taking a second and being like, wait a minute, I have to read that again, or I have to listen to that again because I think I misunderstood what you were trying to say here.
Right. Or if someone comes at you with anger, I think we're both better about being like, hey, let's take a step back.
Right.
I'm going to explain what I just said. Or like, hey, could you reread it? Because I think you might have read it wrong. And we're both good about, or like, we use Marco Polo a lot. Yeah. Or in like a dicey situation where we just want to talk because like texting is the worst when it comes to like,
you can't figure out tone or anything like that. Well, and to just like read a sentence, it's different to hear it said.
Right. And I think something I've learned about Laura is like, Laura's actually really good at being assertive. And I think I'm blunt, but I'm not very assertive. Like my bluntness is like a protective mechanism. So I don't have to be assertive because I'm like, if I just say exactly how I feel, then I don't have to advocate for myself at all. Because and you like me enough to care. But I think Laura's like assertive in a way where she is willing to tell you exactly how she is feeling. And she's like so good at not carrying that with her. Like she's not carrying baggage into it. She's just like, this is how I feel in the moment. Can we talk about it? Great.
And then let's move on.
Yeah. And like, she's not going to like sit there resenting me and like sitting in her own emotions about something. And I really value that in her. And I like didn't know that about you because we had never had we had disagreements in undergrad, but that's been like 20 years old.
We were like 19 and 20. So it's a different time. Still babies. Right. It's like 10 years later. So.
And I also think we've learned a lot of each other, just like sitting across from each other and speaking for hours on end is very different and unique.
Right.
And I love what she brings to the podcast. I love Laura's analysis because she makes me read books in ways I wouldn't read them. And she challenges my thought processes and she makes sure that like, I like learning about how she identifies with Nynaeve is so interesting because I think sometimes we don't see things in each other that we see in ourselves. And so when we are explaining things, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't pick up on like why you would identify with Nynaeve, but I can definitely see it now. And so I think I've learned a lot about like how she views herself and how self-assured she is. And I think that's very impressive.
Yeah. So. I think we can like take a lot from like the way that we interpret characters and the way that we interpret reading and different forms of media and kind of like use that to figure out people in general.
Yeah.
So
I think it's been a very helpful and healthy year. I think we've tried to be as healthy as we possibly can.
And like at the end of the day, we want this to be a positive experience. We don't want to be like doing this and being like, oh my gosh, I have to record.
And we don't want it to be like, oh my God, I just can't talk. Because like talking to Laura is one of my favorite things in the world.
I was just saying, we're friends. We're friends first,
yes.
And then the podcast is second. This is secondary. This is like a perk of our relationship that we do this.
Right.
So if that were ever to like become a thing where we're like, this is becoming like hazardous to our relationship, I think we would both be like, let's take a step back and not do the podcast because our relationship is hurting and that's more important.
Or going to couples counseling. Because it's a huge thing on mental health. And I would be like, I would definitely be the person who was like, let's just see a counselor. Like, who cares?
The way that I laughed,
you're just like, oh my God, why would we do that? They do it in My Favorite Murder. So
I'm just like picturing the two of us going into couples counseling.
God, people do it. I actually know like several podcasters who like went into couples counseling.
Interesting.
Because it's like you're doing a business relationship with a close
it's
friend.
so hard. It's so hard.
So like there are feelings and emotions, and like a podcast is very unique.
Especially if you're doing all the work yourself.
Yeah.
I can see how, or if you're just taking on an immense amount of work, if you're like managing others or that kind of thing. Because like not everybody, like shout out Conan O'Brien, like not everybody has like the resources that he has at Team Coco Podcast, where you can start off immediately successful and be hilarious and have amazing guests, and people edit for you. They do all these things for you. You get like the best editors, you get all these sponsors and everything. And it's like just a fun experience for you to just stop in and talk to Marshawn Lynch and then peace out.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's different when you're an indie podcast and you're figuring this out and trying to do this. It's a lot different. So I can definitely understand why some people do go to counseling.
Well, like Laura said, you have to remember, like, what am I bringing to this? I can't be like resentful of certain things. And like, sometimes it's just like, oh, my feelings are hurt today, but I know they won't be hurt tomorrow. So we can talk through this, and we can respect when someone needs a minute, or like, I think we are learning how the other one communicates. And I think that that's something we just never needed to think about before. Sorry for our giant dad's,
grandfather
clock is in the background. But yeah, I think we've learned a lot about each other, and I think it's been a very positive experience. But our friendship does literally come first overall. Yeah.
I would also say that, like, just doing this podcast. So, like, before we started this podcast, like, not long before we started this podcast, Hannah's mom passed away, and she was going through, like, the unimaginable, the hardest thing ever that anyone can experience is loss of a parent. So just the way that she has moved through that whole process and being able to work on the podcast and to be honestly so open about her feelings and her experience and to be able to talk about that on the podcast, I have really admired that. And I have just thought that was just, I've been really proud of you for that. And also just thought that it was just not only a great addition to the podcast, but I think just a great resource for other people who are going through similar things. And I've just been really proud of you for how well you have managed all of this and done all of these extra things while still going through these different stages and still navigating all of this still.
Well, you're going to make me cry a little. No, I think like I said, guys, I'm an oversharer. Laura takes up when I overshare too much. But I overshare because I think not enough people do that. And I don't think my experience makes me weaker or different or anything. I think lots of people go through, I'm very open with the fact that I've been in therapy since I was 16 years old, and I have a very long-term relationship with a therapist because I think it normalizes it in a way. Like all of my friends are always like, oh, you make it seem so normal. And it's just like, yeah, because working on yourself is normal. And so I think the podcast has given me a even bigger opportunity to share that, because I do think it's very important to share that, like, yeah, losing a parent is one of the worst things that you can possibly imagine. And going through it is you get to grieve in the way you need to grieve and like try to make it better. And I appreciate that Laura's always been there. And I appreciate that Laura and I have the kind of relationship where like she took over the social media for a little bit because I was like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this right now. And she was trying to do it exactly the way I did it. And then I had to text her and be like, listen.
There were so many episodes. Like,
you're doing so much. And I was just like, listen, I understand, but if I'm giving you a job, I can't control how you do it. You get to do it however you see fit.
Like, I'm not good at social media, but I felt like when I first started doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to come up with all these things?
And I was just like, yeah, that's just not possible. And I think we're also good at forgiving each other. Like, I was like, we're going to do 2 blog posts a week. And right now I'm like, not getting the blog posts out, but we're both
It is what it is.
It is what it is. We wish we could get them out. Sometimes you're just,
sometimes we're better about it than, sometimes we're better about things than others. And it's all just life dependent and what's going on. Like sometimes we don't feel well. Sometimes we're busy at work. You know, life happens. And we're just trying to navigate all of this and still produce fun content. So
right. So I think that was a great question for us. What was something that got us? What was something that we got into during the pandemic? I shared this on my Instagram today, but I went from straight hair to curly hair. Like my hair has changed 1,000,000% because I decided like, oh, well, why would I straighten my hair every single day if I'm just going to be seen on a Zoom? And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I could ever like go curly. And guys, when I tell you, like, I had like bone straight hair and like very short bangs at the beginning of the pandemic. And now I have like very healthy, very thick, curly hair. Yeah. So that's definitely something I got into during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a good one. During the pandemic, let me think. It was a different experience for me just because like I was an essential worker. So I was still at work every single day and kind of just navigating everything with masks. I feel like my day-to-day life did not change that much. Just slapped a mask on.
And a lot more stressful.
and a lot more stressful. But during the pandemic, I feel like I spent a lot of time when I was not at work. It was a big release for me to like come home and be with my animals. And I spent, like, I used to have 2 dogs. Now I only have 1, but I spend a lot of time with my dogs. And I was, like, during the 2020 year, I was spending a lot of time outside walking. And I got into bird watching. And I also, like, started, like, a small garden. And I do a lot with my goats, where I've been milking goats. And then I pasteurize milk and make cheese and lotion and stuff. So I guess that was more of a last year thing. But during 2020, I think just the biggest thing for me was I spent so much time just outside and with my animals. So, and that was just a really big release for me and very therapeutic. But I've always kind of been an outside person, but I think it was just more so during that time that I just kind of needed that escape. Even though I was home, I was just outside.
Oh, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was walking like 2 miles a day with my dogs before I even got into work. I also weirdly got into like my zodiac chart.
Okay.
Like, I had never been like, I was always like, oh yeah, I'm a Pisces. But then I got into like researching like what your moon signs mean and what your rising signs mean. And I don't like it for like, I always say this because I feel like it's like, but also just let people like what they like.
Sure.
I don't use it to predict the future. And I'm not dissing on people who do. I'm just saying that's not something I personally do. I really like it to like assess personalities.
Okay.
And so I'm super into that. So people look up your moon and rising and sun charts because it's fun to learn about yourself. And like, I think it's a good way to experience. I love assessing like my weaknesses and my strengths. And I think that it's a good way to kind of reality test what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. Because when you're reading about zodiac signs, you're always like, yeah, that tracks. Sure. Yeah, that track. Yeah, that doesn't. So take what's helpful, leave what isn't, and just have fun. So, but I also walked around a lot. I spent a lot of time outside during the pandemic as well. How do we feel about upcoming series after we get done with the Jordan of it all?
Woohoo! Thank God!
That's amazing. I think
that's how I feel.
I'm excited and a little scared because I think it's just like we started this podcast specifically with Jordan in mind. And so I think moving forward, it's just like one of those things where we're asking ourselves, how is it going to work? How are things going to change? We are going to shift some things with the next series because newsflash at the end when we announced, but Laura has already read through a lot of the series and she's been like, I don't think 4 weeks on these books is necessary. So we're being very open up about like how to change, how to shift, how to make it work for us. And that is always scary because you're like, oh my God, we've been doing this for over a year. We have a great, like, steady of the ship kind of mentality.
I think this is a question that's more like reflective of like our personalities because like I am very like, woohoo, thank God, let's move on. And Hannah's a little more apprehensive about this, but Hannah's definitely more the planner of the two of us. And like, more structured, I would say, whereas I'm more of a go with the flow. I guess let's move on. I can't stand this.
Which is shocking. Like, I think a lot of people who listen to the podcast, if they were like, who's the planner? It would be like, Laura's the planner. Hannah's not. And it's like, Hannah plans so fucking much, guys. And I'm so intense. It's got to be so annoying.
Yeah, I'm definitely more, I guess of the two of us, I'm the more free-spirited one. Which is like laughable.
I always say like free spirits, it's always like in terms of things. Because it's like, I just said I was really into zodiac signs, and that's like one of the most free-spirited things in the fucking world. But like.
And her hair is so curly.
But like, I'm much more free-spirited when it comes to like, oh, I don't need to be married, and I don't need to, and I'm like very unstructured with like how I need my life to be a fulfilled person. But like, when I need to plan something that's like business oriented, I get really type A and like, well, here's what we're doing and here's how we're doing it.
I think as far as this though, it's like something that you've been a little more apprehensive about changes to the format and everything, whereas I'm like, let's change it, let's try new stuff, let's do it. And you've been more like, I'm a little nervous about this. Like, you even put up a post on Twitter the one day like, this is like the first time that we've not talked about Robert Jordan for a month, and this will be like a good testing the waters moment. And I was like, thank God I'm dancing around in my living room.
It's very little insight into our personality.
This book is so much better.
I am excited about like different reading materials. I'm very excited to move on from the Jordan discussion.
Yeah.
I think I'm always just like, oh God, it just sounds like a lot of work to learn something new for me. Mm-hmm. I'm a very busy person. I
mean, I think like moving on, like moving forward, it's not going to be a situation where we're going to drastically change things. No. That's not going to happen. But I think I'm definitely burnt out on Wheel of Time, and I'm ready for a change just personally because I'm getting sick of these books. But I think, and I don't know if Hannah's like a super fan by any means. No. But I think it's just one of those things where it's like you get into this comfort with doing things a certain way and kind of being used to them that it's scary to make adjustments. And
I'm also a creature of habit, guys.
The things that will happen when you make those adjustments.
Guess what food places I order from? Because there's like 5. And I find them and I'm like, these are my favorite food places. I'll order from here. Or I'll make dinner at home because why would I? Like, I'm just a very...
Who makes the best food? Me.
It's not even that. It's just like sometimes ordering small cheval is expensive. But yeah, I'm excited for our content because I think it will be a very good thing for us. I think I just am always a little bit timid when it comes to changing how I live my life because it's very easy to live in a structured manner for me.
Sure.
What's the favorite part of the new community we found?
I think just how like accepting everyone has been.
Yeah. I think the community itself is the best part. Like maybe that's a very bad question.
I mean, it's a very specific community. We've talked about this, I think the last episode that we had with Ben, where we are kind of within this specific little nugget. Yeah. Where there's a lot of sci-fi fantasy fans, just because we've been covering Wheel of Time. Right. It lends to more Wheel of Time fantasy fans. And that might change as we go forward and cover different types of books. But I think the community that we are in, we definitely, like, I know myself, I have not read a lot of fantasy, but the people that we interact with on Twitter especially they're like hardcore fantasy fans. Yeah. And nobody has ever like been rude to us or been like, you don't belong. Like even people that we don't interact with that much have been really good about trying to promote our content and sharing episodes and stuff that we don't really like know them that well or like interact with them much. So it's been just really great to have people that are accepting, trying to get different opinions out there, even if they're like, you know what, I love the Wheel of Time and these two people hate it and they rag on it all the time. But I think
we don't hate it, but we do rag on it all the time.
So, but I think that could be jarring to somebody that loves Wheel of Time. Right. But I think that just how accepting and welcoming the community has been the best part of it.
What might shift? Well, this is a bad question. I'm just going to answer it really quick. What might shift in the last 3 books? Mm-hmm. Laura's already said that she's ready to be a little bit more forgiving because Brandon Sanderson has a big thing going forward. Right. And so I think the writing style, everything will shift with that, but we'll move forward with that one. Okay. Literature and Lo-Fi asks us, what other fantasy books have piqued our curiosity since reading Wheel of Time? I mean, I started the first book in the Jade Legacy trilogy. That one's piqued my interest. The next series we're covering has piqued my interest. Because we will be covering fantasy, FYI. I think, like, I'm also more open to trying different fantasies. I'm going through Joe Abercrombie's Third Law series right now, and I enjoy it. I enjoy trying to experience grimdark. I'm actually writing fantasy right now. It's a little bit more of, like, fantasy in our world type of thing. It's not high fantasy by any means. But I think, like, because of that, I'm more interested in seeing what types of fantasy there are out there. Sure. My first foray into fantasy was, of course, Game of Thrones, and then Brent Weeks, which, again, a toxic boyfriend got me into, because now I think about us reading Brent Weeks, and I'm like, oh my god, we would have so many issues with it. But I read it when I was very much in love, and I was like, this is amazing. Thank you for introducing me to these things. I have been in law school for so long. I'm enlightened. Reading. Yeah, I'm enlightened. Although in Brent Weeks' defense, the way he treats women is trash, but so are a lot of other fantasy writers. Yeah. And his world building is so fantastic. It is a very well built book series. I just don't know if we'd ever cover it on the podcast. Sure. So I think I'm more interested in learning about different fantasies, and I'm open to anything, but I also don't want fantasy to be the only thing I ever read, because when I do, I get really bogged down. Yeah. I know, like, so what was the question again? Like, what fantasy books have piqued our curiosity? Have piqued our curiosity through the podcast, or just, like, in general? Since starting and reading Wheel of Time. I would say that has turned me off to fantasy. Like, I don't want to read things that are very similar to Wheel of Time, honestly. Like, I think I like fantasy, but I don't want to read this specific subset of 90s white man writes a bunch of fantasy books. Like, if I was going to read any fantasy, the guy that I am interested in, just because his Goodreads reviews are very good and the ones of children's are hilarious, is Patrick Rothfuss. I mean, when he comes out with the third book, we may just have to do that series, because it's such a big deal. That if he does, but is it coming out? He is writing it. Okay. Quote unquote. He's, like, always writing it. It's one of those things where he has been very open about, like, if I'm not enjoying writing this, and if I don't think it's ready, I'm not publishing it. I mean, good for him. This is my baby, and I'm not going to just publish it so you guys will stop bothering me. Like, he's very open about that stuff. Yeah. Good for him. He's probably the person that my curiosity has piqued, just because I find his Goodreads reviews very good and also hilarious. But in other fantasy, I think I would be more interested in trying some indie authors that we have found on Twitter, instead of the, like, big guys all the time, you know. Like, I'm less interested in reading Brandon Sanderson's work, and, like, I haven't even read any Brandon Sanderson, but, like, I'm less interested in reading his stuff than I am to try out some of these indie authors. Right. Laura and I are kind of the same mind, where it's like, yeah, these books are great, but we don't need to just read the foundational text to appreciate other authors, because the foundational text all came from a very similar pool, unfortunately. And so, like, there's so much more out there. Like, me saying I want to read Octavia Butler, she is a foundational person in sci-fi, and she is a Black author, and I think that leads to more discussion. And I don't think Laura and I want to have the same discussion over and over again of, like, what did this mean for fantasy? I don't think we're really interested in that conversation as much as other podcasts that already do that. Where I think our conversations are more about, we want to discuss analysis of the text itself and what it means in a 2020 context or 2022 context. Yeah, and then, like Hannah said before, like, we are kind of diverse readers, where we don't read the same genre all the time, and I specifically do not read a lot of fantasy, and it's kind of hard for me to read a ton of fantasy, because I have a hard time trying to figure the worlds out, and if I read too much fantasy, honestly, I get them confused. Like, I can read multiple books at a time, but I cannot read two fantasies at one time, because it's just confusing to me. So, yeah. Ben said, marry, snog, kill lot pairings. I thought of one where I want you to do marry, snog, kill of Thail, Barrelane, and Gawain. This is the hardest question.
Fyodor's gone. I guess I'm marrying Berlin.
You're marrying the predator?
I guess.
She's a sexual predator.
I
guess. And then you're snogging Gawain?
Yeah, I can't marry him.
I mean, that's the problem is, like, I hate Gawain. He's my least favorite character. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I guess I think I am marrying Fyodor. Because, like, it would be, like, one of those marriages where it's like, okay, you go over here, I stay over here, we don't interact.
Well, that's what I was kind of thinking.
And then I think I would have to kiss Gawain, and then I think I would kill Berlin because she is a sexual predator. And I'm like, I can't forgive that.
That was very difficult.
I know, right? I thought of the best one. Like,
oh, you came up with that?
I did!
I thought Ben came up with that.
I asked.
I was like, oh my gosh, evil.
No, that was me. Ben. He just said, like, any pairing.
Oh, so, any pairing. Wow.
Do you have a pairing that you would want to do?
Wow. I don't know. That was a really hard one.
I know. I think it's the hardest.
Yeah. I mean, when you pick a bunch of characters nobody likes, it is very difficult.
That's always that's what the whole point of Marry, Fuck, Kill.
I guess. Wow. Yeah, I can't think of one to top that.
What about Rand, Perrin, and Matt?
I mean, marry Matt.
Yeah. At this point, yeah. Because it would have been Marry Perrin for a long time.
I guess
but now
goodbye, Perrin.
Yeah, I guess goodbye, Perrin. That's so shocking for us.
I know.
We're, like, so on his side.
I used to love Perrin, but goodbye, Perrin.
Goodbye, Perrin.
And if we're going on TV show people, marry, snog, kill, Lan, Tom, and Matt.
Oh my God. Lan, Tom, Matt. I can't kill one of them. They're all so dreamy. You marry Lan. You marry Lan.
Yeah, I mean, you marry Lan, snog, Tom,
and you kill Matt again, I guess, because it's like the lesser of all three.
Yeah.
Oh. What about TV, Moraine, Nynaeve, and Suzanne? Swan.
Ooh, okay. I would marry Nynaeve. I like all of them, though.
I know. That's the whole point.
I guess goodbye, Suzanne.
I know. I think it would be goodbye, Swan. I think I would marry Moraine, and I think I would snog Nynaeve. Because that feels very hot for the TV show.
Sure.
But not book them. I don't really care for any of them in the book.
Sure.
So I guess I'd still marry Moraine in the book. She's like the lesser of three evils. And then I would probably snog Swan in that case. But
sure.
You know. What has been our favorite Wheel of Time book so far from literature and LoFi?
Favorite Wheel of Time book? 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah, I think 4 or 5.
Shadow Rising was really good. Even though that was the one
too.
I'm pretty sure where they teleported to a cave to sleep together. And I was very annoyed with that.
We both were.
but
the storylines were so there.
Yeah, I really liked the series a lot through book 5.
Yeah. Veronica asked this, and I actually think it's a really good discussion, even though it kind of sounds like a repeat. If we could do the last year over again, would you still choose Wheel of Time?
Probably. Yeah.
I think so. And I think it's a good context for our podcast. And I actually talked to her on the phone, so she's heard this before, but this is a little spiel on this. I'm not really into what ifs. Like, I don't think it's productive for us to be like, what if we chose a better, not 90s version of this? Because I just don't think that's productive for the conversations we're having. I do think, like Laura said, I'm a little bit more forgiving of Wheel of Time than she is sometimes. And sometimes, like, I am very careful about, like, I don't mind that we rag on these books. I think it's hilarious. I'm also not someone who pushes others to read them very often.
Yeah.
But I am careful because I don't think we should ever, and I'm sure Laura agrees with this, I don't think we should ever rag on it to the point where people feel like we're telling them that they're trash for finding value in these books. Because that's never our intention.
No.
We're making fun of the stories from a 2022 context.
Yeah.
When we see funny things, but we understand the appreciation and how amazing it is that, like, a man tried to write one book and he wrote 11 books and had someone else write the last 3. Like, I think a lot of stuff that happened in these books, it is a 90s problem. It's not always a Robert Jordan problem. Right. And I think, like, we're pretty open about that. And I just wanted to remind everyone of that because we're not sitting here being like, Wheel of Time is trash and you're trash for liking it. I think we're just like, these are very 90s books. So reading them in present day is sometimes very funny.
Yeah.
Like, we're critiquing them. So we're going to critique them, but we are very careful about saying, like, we understand that these books have value and they have value for many people. And it's now an Amazon show series that we very much love. So I don't think we would go back and change it. So, I
mean, even coming from the perspective of me now where I'm like, I'm so ready to be done with these books, I still don't think that I would like go back in time and be like, stop, you two! Don't do the Wheel of Time!
I mean, yeah, and like, but it's all fairness, like I was telling our dog walker that we had a podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I read the Wheel of Time, don't read them. I mean, so, unless you're a huge fantasy fan. Like, I think they are great for fantasy readers or people who love reading.
I would never want to discourage people from reading them. Like, if you want to read them, go for it. Like, I actually really enjoyed books 1 through 5. So
I think I even enjoyed book 6.
I think book 6 is when it started to get like, I'm like,
Lord of Chaos was book 6, so you might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think things kind of play out the way that they do for reasons, and I think that for like the way that the podcast has played out and everything, that it's been what it is. Yeah. So I kind of,
and it's been fun. Like, fun when we're.
I don't think I would change it. Don't think I would change that.
We're ready to be done, but we wouldn't change the experience and the journey right until that point. She also asks, what's the oddest side effect of starting the podcast? I think my dad telling a bunch of people, like my family members, that I have a podcast, but I told them not to. That's a very strange side effect. I'm not bitter.
I think our families are both kind of like, we tried to keep this like kind of under wraps for a while, where we're like, we're not going to tell anybody that we have a podcast, you know, we're just going to like keep it quiet or whatever. But then obviously it got out because it was like one of those things like, why can't you do this right now? And it's like, I'm recording a podcast, so I can't do that.
Well, my dad would just like be sitting around after I told him not to, and then he'd be like, Anna started a podcast. And I'm like, Dad, like, I asked you to do one thing. I make the joke of like Michael Scott when he's like, you cheated on me, but I specifically asked you not to. I'm always like, Dad, you told me about my podcast, but I specifically asked you not to. That is a very specific joke I make a lot. So.
I think that, we both like have that experience with our families where they're like kind of like shocked and also like proud of us, where they're like, oh, let's like go listen to their podcast, and like we're glad about that they're supportive and that they think that it's fun that we're doing this.
I know.
So
I mean, my little nephew, sometimes my sister's driving in the car and he's like, oh, Aunt Hannah's podcast. Like, that's the most adorable thing. Here's my voice once a week.
That's really cute.
That is very cute. And then, has anyone found the podcast that we did not expect? Yeah, most of my family members. While we're on the topic, I think anyone finding the podcast like shocked us.
I think we're just like amazed in general. Like, we have listeners? What? Like, we don't have a huge following by any means. We'd love to. Team Coco Podcast, please hit us up so we can join your network. We'd love to have a bigger following and have more listeners, but we're just thrilled with the listeners we have. Yes. Like, we're shocked, honestly, that people want to listen to us.
When people retweet us, when people are like, oh, I'm listening to your podcast. When, like, I'm sorry, I get so, like, heartfelt when someone's, like, messages on our Instagram and they're like, I finally read book 6, so I'll listen to your episodes. I'm like, oh, yay, thank you.
Whenever people like interact with us on Twitter, and like some people will be like, oh yeah, I also love Beartown, or like, I listened to what you guys said about this and I think that or whatever, and I think that you should think about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you for interacting with us.
We love this. Yeah. So I think anyone listening is just like such a fun experience for us. So TC Tippins asked, if there were a blooper reel in the pod, what are some of the best bloopers? I think the one I still always remember is there was an episode where I started it and I was like, welcome to our pod. And like, I stopped and I was like, I should redo that. And Laura was like, you sounded like you were about to like do something you hate. And like, why are you here?
I didn't know what was going on that afternoon when we recorded, but it was like, Hannah, like, usually she takes a breath and then says, welcome to our pod. But at this point, she was like, welcome to our pod. And I was like, wow, somebody is happy to be here today.
And even like the way I introduce it, I always have the same inflection, and people will now get annoyed by it.
To our
But I
pod.
even do like a weird like run of welcome because I always go, welcome to our pod.
Yes.
And it's like, why do I do that weird welcome?
We will never know.
I don't know. So you tell me, why am I doing it that way?
I'll start opening the pod and I'll be like,
we're so excited to be here.
I'll do one of my classic imitations. My voices.
I'll start introducing it like I'm late and I'm kind of British, but not really.
Yes.
So I would say that that's the best blooper. There are also many, there are many things Laura cuts out where it's like, your face is frozen.
Yeah.
It would just be a
Yeah.
long thing of like, a face being weirdly frozen and us being like, you're frozen right now.
Yeah. Are you there? I can't hear you. Like, are you still there?
Oh,
Internet probs.
Yeah. So mostly that. There's not a ton of
Yeah.
bloopers where we like mess up what we're trying to say.
I mean, we leave a lot of the funny stuff in.
Yeah.
Like, if there's something hilarious that happens, we are very unlikely to cut it out.
Yes. I mean, there was once where Laura did a record scratch because I messed up how I introduced
Yeah.
the podcast. So I think we leave mostly everything in.
Yeah.
Queen_Beatrix asked us, what was the first book or series we read that blew our minds?
That blew our minds.
Yeah, and they said that they remember vividly that they were like trying to tell their mom about a storyline in the book Crystal Mask in middle school. I would say one of the books that really blew my mind because I was always a really big reader, and my oldest sister took me to the library when she was 16 and I was 6, and so she like would get me chapter books when I was far too young to be reading chapter books because she was 16, and she's like, I'm not taking this little child to the library again. So she always got me chapter books, so I always think about that. But it was from my mom. I have a memory. My mom she was the manager of a grocery store, and I remember her specifically, and this is why these books are so important to me, even though we joke about them all the time. The Thoroughbred series, the first Ashley book in the Thoroughbred series, was on display in the grocery store, and my mom got it for me right before we were about to go on a long trip, and she was like, here you go. And I remember that that's the first book where I read it, and I was like, oh my God, I love reading. I love reading so much, and I love reading about this topic, and then I became obsessed with horses for 5 years and took horse riding lessons.
Sure.
But that was one of the first books that I remember being like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And then like also a Great and Terrible Beauty series by Libba Bray. I read those in high school, and I remember being like, this is what good literature is.
Sure.
Like, I was so impressed with those books. And I just remember them blowing my mind in high school and like reinforcing why I love things like fantasy, why I love reading books about strong women, because there were so many strong women in that novel. And Libba Bray did such an amazing job. And I also remember it's like one of the few times I was reading books in high school where there wasn't necessarily the happiest of endings for all the characters. And I remember thinking like, wow, you can end a book without like some of the characters getting their happy ending, and people can just have personal growth in a novel, and that could be the ultimate outcome. And I remember that blowing my mind.
Yeah. I think for me, like as a kid, this is going to sound really dumb, but I really liked the Series of Unfortunate Events books by Lemony Snicket. Daniel Handler is a problematic author.
He loves that Lolita.
We cannot stress that enough. However,
Jamie Loftus, it's favorite book was Lolita.
However, like those books were very important to me as a kid, and you know, like as a third grader and fourth grader, I think is when I was like first starting those, and they were still coming out and everything, and I always used to get excited about when we'd get a new one. And I remember going to the stores and my mom buying them for me, and I remember like I was also one of these kids that when I was excited about something, I would always like tell my mom about it, and she would get to the point, I'm sure, where she was like, okay, I'm sick of hearing about this. You've told me about this a million times. But I remember those books specifically where I would like read about things that the kids were doing in those books. And then I was like, I want to do that. I want to be a cartographer. And I was like, what would have sparked an interest that I wanted to be a map maker, you know, like those books. So like the things that happen in books are like really important. And I think those books specifically are pretty out there, and he uses big words and then explains what they mean, which is important for kids literature. But I really loved those books a lot, and they were very important to me. So those are probably some of the first that I wouldn't necessarily say blew my mind, but they were like different from the other books I was reading, because I also read a lot of horse books, a lot of animal books that were very important to me too. But those books specifically those a series of Fortune Events books were so different from other things that I was reading as a kid, and were just like shocking to me that people would want to do these things, that girls would want to be engineers, that that I was learning some of these bigger words or learning about what a map maker is and that kind of thing. So I think those books were the ones that probably like first blew my mind.
I like it. Veronica asked, what are some books that you've been recommended that you never plan to read in your life or on the pod?
What's it called? Malazan or something like that?
Hard pass for me. We're not reading.
I'm probably not going to read those. I don't even know anything about them, but I'm just like, everyone's recommended those so much that I'm just like, pass.
There are certain books that I'm like, I don't need to read these. Like, so many people have kind of tried to convince me that I need to continue reading Sarah J. Maas, and I'm like, I'm probably never going to read her. Like,
okay.
I think I'm good.
Lots of people love her.
Well, I've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, so I'm like, I might continue with that series because I've heard the second book is better, but I just don't feel the need to be part of that. And I'm not, again, don't hate on people for enjoying books, but it's just one of those books where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to read that. And any, who's the lady who has all the like Nicole Kidman book series, like Leanne Moriarty? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I'm never going to read
like The Big Little Lies.
I'm never going to read one of her books. I will watch every single TV show that comes out about her books, but I do not need to consume those books.
That's
I'm
fair.
good.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I would say probably like Malazan or whatever it is.
Very on brand for our podcast. Fox and Snakes asked us, did either of us ever feel like giving up on Wheel of Time?
I would say no, because we committed to doing this. I would say if we weren't doing this podcast, I probably would have stopped. But I feel like because we made the commitment to do this podcast and read this series, we've committed to reading book series. And even though we've been taking breaks and everything, we're still going to finish the series. I don't think, there's been times where I've been like really frustrated with these books and everything, but there was never a time where I was like, I'm just not going to finish this series. No, we committed to reading this. I committed to reading this series, and I'm going to finish it. And
this is where we're both a little bit different. I do think it would have been healthier for us to just cover one book of RBJ every 6 months.
Sure.
And I think we probably would have had better conversations, maybe. I think the way we did it was not the healthiest of ways.
It gets to be, it drags out.
Drags on.
It gets to you after a while to constantly just be like, how do we feel about him?
I don't know.
Don't know.
How do you feel about this character who has 10 pages of screen time?
Yeah.
And I would also say that I'm a little bit more sensitive where I'm the one who suggested this series. And I am also just very sensitive when it comes to friends. I don't like seeing them annoyed so I think there were times when I was willing to quit it if Laura wanted to. And Laura was the one who had to reassure me nope, we're doing this. I've got this. And I was just like, because our friendship comes first. And there were times where I wanted to check and make sure she was not mentally okay and are you unwell, but are you prepared to do this, and do you want to? And if you don't, all you have to do is say it and we can give up on this series, and I'm okay with that. And Laura was the one who was like, no, we're gonna see it to the end and that's gonna be perfect. But that wasn't about the books. That was about our friendship and making sure my friend wanted to continue and checking in and making sure we were communicating, as we said before. So I think that's the only time I was willing to do it, and it was always because of Laura. So.
Do you think, if we weren't doing the podcast and you just started reading these, that you would have?
I never finished a series, so no.
Yeah, I feel like I probably would have gotten to
maybe book 5,
and then just been starting book 6 and been like, I'm out.
Yeah, I think I would have been okay, this series happens.
Yeah, so I'll just Google the rest. Wikipedia is pretty reliable.
We're also terrible at finishing. I'm terrible at finishing series. So I do think that this is a good podcast because it makes us doing this now. So yeah,
this is just a very long series. Is the thing. So.
We did not. We were like, don't worry, it's 14 months, and then a couple months, and we're like, we need a break. We need a long break. And then we took 2 weeks off, and someone was like, I think you need longer.
Yeah.
So
the breaks help, and I think it's nice to mix it up.
And then it's Foxes and Snakes asked if Goblin, can we admit Goblin is the best? And no, we cannot. No. But their final question, which leads us into our final discussion of the episode, is what other series would we like to cover? And without further ado, it is time to announce our next series. So we know everyone is very excited, and we're discussing what comes next for the podcast in this segment. But so for the next thing, we discuss it, and we are doing a little bit of a poll and voting on an indie intermission. We will be covering one book by an indie author.
Yeah.
Right after we finish Wheel of Time, we'll do a wrap-up episode of Wheel of Time, and then we will do an indie intermission. We'll discuss one book. It can be a series. It can be a standalone. We're kind of open to whatever comes next with that, but that's what we will be doing for 1 month. We also are not like,
but if it's like 5 books, like we're not going to be able to read 5 books in a month. So be realistic, people. Like duology is probably doable in a month.
Yes.
But
or we can just read one of the books and just be like, we're covering this one book they did this month, and like that'll be enough, you know. But we will be covering an indie book. And that's not saying that we will never cover an indie author as one of these series. We're just kind of taking a pause and letting ourselves have it. And we want to focus on indie authors in this thing, especially to highlight them and get people to
And we're thinking about doing more of those in the future, too, in between series.
Exactly. So. And then we're covering a book that Hannah chose. Yeah. Laura gets the next chosen one. And we discussed it, too. She agreed to this podcast. But I said I really wanted to cover The Poppy Wars by R.F. Kuang.
Yeah, I think it's
Kuang. Okay, I can repeat. The Poppy Wars by R.F. Kuang.
Yeah.
We're really excited to do this series. I can't wait to read them. Laura's already read them a little bit. And I
read the first 2.
Yes. And I think the plan is to cover the books in 3-week chunks.
Yeah.
And then just have kind of an off week where we're doing more of a check-in and we're more talking about like themes we've noticed, themes of books. We'll cover like a topic. And that gives us a little bit of a breathing room in between each book. And it's just because we don't think we necessarily need a whole month on these specific series. They're not as big as Robert Jordan.
They're not 1,000 pages with a 300-page.
There's not so many characters. So we'll likely be doing 2 plot episodes and character episodes.
Yeah.
And we'll be figuring out if we need to do extra and do like, we'll talk about them next week because we have an extra week to fill in. I think it's
nice to have some flexibility that way.
Yes. And our next mini-series, we're actually asking for you guys to help us with the name. We have Shaitan on the Wheel of Time. We have a couple of suggestions. We know that these are supposed to be very sad books. You're supposed to, R.F. Kuang has told you to hold your bucket, get a bucket for buckets of tears. And so we thought it could be called Crying Buckets of Tears over the Poppy Wars, or we know that anger and rage is a huge theme in these novels, especially since Laura has read a couple of these. So we also want to suggest Raging on the Poppy Wars, which kind of gives us the Shaitan on the Wheel of Time trend. But if anyone's read them and has suggestions for what we should name the miniseries, you should definitely feel free to let us know, because we'll be covering all 3 books. We're really excited about it.
Yes.
And we just can't wait. So
it'll be really nice to jump into something different and shorter.
Shorter, a little bit where, there's history involved.
Actually, like totally different.
Wars,
so
it's just so different. So I can't wait to cover them. We're excited about it. Like I'm so excited to be covering something different, and we're looking forward to it. So,
and as always, like if you have suggestions for things you want us to cover in the future, like let us know. Hannah's already mentioned that she would like to cover like Octavia Butler in the future, and like I have some things I'd like to cover in the future. We mentioned Stephen King before on the podcast that we would like to delve into that.
We literally have a running list, so if you want to add to the list, just message us, and we're looking at different
things.
It's
always changing, so just send us suggestions.
Send us suggestions for really
the Poppy War is next.
I know, yay! I'm so excited to switch things up. And Laura, I just want to say after a year, thank you so much for being my best friend.
Thank you. This has been such a fun experience.
I know. Your friendship is the most important thing to me, and I can't imagine doing this with anyone else, and I'm really glad we're experiencing this together and building something very unique. So,
yeah, for sure.
I'm very excited. Wish me happy birthday tomorrow, guys.
Happy birthday,
I turn 31 on tomorrow when this podcast comes out.
3-3.
So 3-3, I'll be 31. My nephew turns 6 the day after. I'm not invited to his birthday party because I asked him, and he told me no.
You got uninvited?
I wasn't even invited. He said, I'm having my birthday party at my Taekwondo studio on Friday. And I said, oh, cool. Can I come? And he goes, I really only invited my friends. I was like, wow, that was a harsh no.
That's ouch.
And then my sister found out and she laughed and she said, your family is coming too. You can invite Hannah. So,
ouch.
But he's turning 6. So happy birthday to both of us. And guys, just like thank you for joining us on our wedding anniversary. This is such a good celebration, and we're just really thankful for all of you and each other. So, with that said, have a good week, and next week have an okay week because we will be starting Robert Jordan
getting back into it.
and Sanderson's 12th book, which is called
Gathering Storm, right?
The Gathering Storm. We'll be covering the first half. A lot more chapters because he's a lot slimmer in the chapters than Robert Jordan was, but we'll be covering the first half of the book.
Thank you.
So have a good week. Bye.
Bye.